Revenge of the PBI, BV206 flight, the Falkland Islands, 1992. Hello, I'm Di-Fanteria, and today we've moved away from all things Ursus and halcyon once again. This short film is about the revenge of the PBI, the Poor Bloody Infantry. There's an old saying, the Army has traditions, the Navy has customs, and the RAF has bad habits. Quite who first said it, I've no idea, but whoever it was understood inter-service rivalry rather well. There have always been jokes about the RAF deploying an exercise into hotels, while the PBI deploys into a forestry block in the winter in the pissing rain. And annoyingly, there was occasionally just enough truth in them to keep the jokes alive. My own late wife served in the Royal Air Force, who, incidentally, I met on this Falklands tour. And what with Queen's regulations at the time, it caused quite a stir within the Royal Air Force Police. That is a story for another day. One thing I always admired about her service was that it genuinely looked after its people. Even in the late 1980s and early 1990s, RAF enlisted servicemen and women could find themselves living in their own rooms. Some even had ensuite bathrooms. To an infantry officer, this was practically science fiction. Years later, when I visited my future wife in Italy, where she was on operational duties with a fighter squadron, I had just emerged from 3 months working underground in the intelligence cell at Besbrook Mill in South Armagh. She was living in a 4-star hotel, swimming pool, air conditioning, ensuite bathroom, blackout curtains, all the amenities. I'd actually travelled there to ask her to marry me, but I couldn't help thinking that I had very definitely joined the wrong service. Anyway, it brings us to the Falkland Islands in 1992. B Company 1 Kings had deployed south as the Resident Infantry Company, or the RIC. Our home was Mount Pleasant Airfield, the enormous military complex built after the 1982 Falklands War, roughly 30 miles from Port Stanley. Mount Pleasant had opened in 1985 to provide the islands with a permanent fighter and transport presence. But it wasn't simply an airfield. It was a vast joint military complex containing accommodation, offices, messes, and recreational facilities, all connected by seemingly endless weatherproof corridors, several miles of them. Perhaps inevitably, someone christened the place the Death Star, and the name stuck. It was inside the Death Star in the shared officers' mess that we encountered another very odd RAF phenomenon. Oh, no, sorry, not a 7-year-old. The fast jet pilot. Now, fighter pilots, or at least the ones I knew, and not you singles, were a very particular breed. Their favoured evening attire was the flying suit. These were liberally decorated with squadron badges, flying insignia, and pictures of fast jets tearing dramatically through the sky. But we soon christened them baby grows. There was also a long-established tradition in an Army or Royal Navy officers' mess. If someone enters who isn't a member of your regiment, ship, or unit, you go out of your way to welcome them. You bring them into the group, you offer them a drink. Not our fast jet brethren. Oh no. They had a squadron flag. And in the evening, they would lay it on the floor of the mess, in their grow bags, and stand on it. It wasn't enormous, perhaps 6 by 3 feet, which made the message rather obvious. If you don't fly fast jets, you're not coming onto our flag. We watched this performance for several weeks, and eventually the infantry decided that something needed to be done. Not a complaint, not an argument, certainly not a strongly worded letter, something much more effective: ridicule. And for that, we possess the perfect weapon: the Hägglunds BV206. The BV206 was a Swedish-designed articulated tracked all-terrain vehicle, and it was a magnificent piece of kit. It consisted of 2 linked tracked cabins with power delivered through all 4 tracks. Its enormous rubber tracks produce remarkably low ground pressure, allowing it to travel across the boggy, unforgiving Falklands terrain, where many conventional vehicles would rapidly find themselves going nowhere. It could carry up to 17 people. It could cross deep snow. It could traverse bogs. It could climb gradients that looked thoroughly unreasonable. It could even swim across rivers and streams. It had only one significant deficiency: it couldn't fly, which made it absolutely perfect for our purposes. With the assistance of the company quartermaster sergeant major, khaki overalls were required. If the fast jet fraternity could wander around the mess in baby crews covered in flying insignia, then clearly Britain's newest aviation unit required precisely the same thing. So we started manufacturing our own. BV206 badges, squadron insignia, flying qualifications, mission patches, thigh crossword puzzles. The more ridiculous, the better. And thus, in the Falkland Islands in 1992, BV206 flight was born. But merely creating the baby grows wasn't quite enough. If we were going to be an elite flying unit, we needed to look like one. Ray-Ban aviators appeared. White silk flying scarves with wire coat hangers in them were produced. And that was because there wasn't much chance of those scarves streaming heroically behind us inside an officer's mess. So yes, the coat hangers went in. One of our number completed the ensemble with a magnificent pair of big old-styled leather flying goggles. We were ready. And incidentally, I still have the photographic evidence. There we are. The BV206 flight originals. And I'm the idiot at the front wearing the aviators. That very evening, the members of Britain's least aerodynamically capable flying unit entered the officer's mess. We didn't say anything. We didn't explain ourselves. In fact, we didn't say very much at all for a good time. We simply marched in carrying our camouflage poncho. Then, in the middle of the mess carpet, we carefully laid it down. This was our flight territory. We climbed aboard and proceeded to ignore absolutely everyone else in the room. For several minutes, nothing happened. We bought some drinks, but then came the glances, then the puzzled expressions from the various squadron flag carpets around the mess. And eventually, the obvious question began circulating around it: who the bloody hell are these people? We, however, remained aloof. After all, we were aviators now. Eventually, though, someone rather more important became interested. It was the station commander himself, a very senior RAF officer, and rather wonderfully, he was also wearing a baby grow, despite having what was essentially a desk-bound appointment. He walked across the mess towards us. Naturally, we immediately invited him onto our camouflage poncho. After all, unlike other certain flying units, BV206 flight welcomed guests. He stepped onto our territory. We said hello. And then he asked the obvious question: who on earth were we? Bear in mind that we'd been there for several weeks already in the officers' mess and around Mount Pleasant Airfield. But we explained perfectly seriously that we were BV206 flight, sir. He looked at us. Then he began examining our uniforms, the khaki baby grows, the Ray-Bans, the flying scarves, the goggles, and finally our magnificent collection of entirely fictitious BV206 squadron badges and flying qualifications. There was a pause, and then the penny dropped. He understood exactly what we had done. More importantly, he understood why we had done it. The magnificent piss take had worked. Very shortly afterwards, the squadron flags disappeared from the floor of the officers' mess, and baby grows were banned unless you were just returned from flying or were shortly going airborne. The good news was that bonhomie returned, and what followed was an extremely boozy and extremely rewarding evening. But let's not forget, the PBI had won 8,050 miles from home. Not with shouting, not with complaints, and not with orders, and certainly not by flying anything. We had done it with a camouflage poncho, some khaki coveralls, a collection of homemade badges, Ray-Ban aviators, bigles, goggles, and white silk scarves reinforced with coat hangers. We all even had blank crossword puzzles on our thighs, just in case we got bored mid-flight. Sadly, BV206 flight never took to the skies, and after that night, it never needed to take to the carpet again. A small victory for the PBI there, and proof that sometimes the most effective weapon available to the British infantryman is taking the piss. Tally ho! Chocks away, Ginger!